The forge is cold when you first smell it, ash and old smoke pressed into the walls of the small room where you sleep. Somewhere beyond the shutter, a cartwheel catches on a stone in the street, and a dog answers it with one bark before going quiet again. Welcome to History of Ordinary People. Here we leave behind the famous names and step into the lives of the people who built the world around them. Live the lives history forgot. You wake before the light does, the way you always do, your body knowing the hour even without seeing it. The straw mattress beneath you has worn into the shape of your back over the years, and for a moment you lie still, listening to Ostia stir around you. Somewhere near the harbour a rope creaks against a mooring post. A door opens 2 houses down. The city is waking the way it always wakes, one small sound joining another until the whole street is awake without anyone deciding it. Your hands find the edge of the blanket before your eyes fully open, and you sit up slowly, the way a man sits up when his shoulders have spent years bent over an anvil. There is a dull ache across your back that has nothing to do with sleep, and everything to do with yesterday's hammering, and you roll your shoulder once, twice, feeling it settle into the day. On the small table near the door sits yesterday's bread, hard now, and a jug of watered wine you left uncovered. You break off a piece of the bread anyway, chewing slowly while you look toward the window, where the sky has gone the grey colour that means dawn is close, but not yet arrived. Somewhere in the back of your mind, before you've even finished the bread, you think of the chisel. It came in late yesterday, wrapped in a scrap of cloth, brought by a mason who works stone 2 streets over. The edge had chipped badly, a piece of it curling back on itself the way iron does when it has struck something harder than it was made to strike. You turned it over in the fading light and told him you would look at it properly in the morning, when the forge was hot and your eyes were fresh. He needs it back by tomorrow. The block he is cutting will not wait, and a mason without a working chisel is a mason standing still, which is its own kind of expensive. You finish the bread, wipe the crumbs from your palm onto your tunic, and reach for the leather apron hanging on its peg by the door. It is stiff in the mornings, the leather remembering yesterday's heat even after a night of cooling, and you work it over your shoulders with the ease of a motion repeated 10,000 times. Your sandals are where you left them, soot still ground into the seams from days you have long since stopped counting. Outside, the street has that particular colour it takes on just before sunrise, grey stone going faintly gold at the edges. A cart passes, its driver nodding to you the way neighbours nod to each other when neither has the time to stop, and somewhere down toward the warehouses you can already hear the low creak of a handcart being loaded, the first of many that will pass your doorway before the day is through. Ostia does not wait for the sun. It simply begins, and you begin with it. The walk to the workshop is short, past a bakery where the smell of warming bread has already started to drift into the street, and past the shuttered stall of a fishmonger who has not yet arrived. You nod to a woman sweeping her doorstep. You step around a puddle left from last night's washing water. None of it takes any real thought. Your feet know this street the way your hands know the anvil. The forge sits at the end of a narrow lane, its front open to the street, dark and cold at this hour in a way it never is by midday. You push the door aside and stand for a moment in the doorway, looking at the shape of the room before you step inside, the way you have looked at it every morning for longer than you care to count. The hearth waits, grey with yesterday's ash. The tools sit where you left them, tongs leaning against the wall, hammers resting in their worn places on the shelf, and near the back, wrapped in its scrap of cloth, the mason's chisel waits too. You will need the fire built and breathing before you can do anything about it, but first, the ash from yesterday has to go. The ash from the hearth goes into a clay pot by the door, grey dust rising in a thin curl as you scrape it clear with an old iron paddle worn smooth at the handle. Underneath, a few embers still hold their colour, small and stubborn, the way they always do if the ash was banked well the night before. You crouch beside them, blowing once, twice, watching the orange deepen before you feed in the first splinters of kindling. By the time the boy arrives, you have charcoal stacked and the bellows uncovered, and he goes to them without being told, the leather creaking as he pumps it in the slow, steady rhythm you taught him months ago. Too fast and the fire gutters, too slow and it starves. He is your sister's son, 13 this spring, and his arms have only recently grown strong enough to keep the rhythm through a full morning without your having to take over. You watch the coals brighten with each breath of air, red climbing toward orange, and you say nothing, because nothing needs saying. The fire is doing what fires do when they are fed correctly. You reach for the cloth-wrapped bundle on the shelf and unwrap the mason's chisel, turning it once in the growing light from the doorway. The edge has curled back on itself where it struck something harder than stone should have been. A small fold of metal bent nearly double, with a hairline crack running back from the fold toward the shank. Not a clean chip. A chip you could grind and be done with in an hour. This is worse. The edge itself has failed, folded rather than broken, which tells you the iron was pushed past what it could bear before it ever met your forge. You will need to cut the damaged folded section away entirely, draw fresh metal down from the body of the tool, and reshape the edge from iron that has not already been weakened by whatever blow ruined it. You set the chisel aside for a moment and look to the fire instead. Not ready yet. The coals are bright but uneven, hot near the centre and dull toward the edges, and iron laid into an uneven fire heats unevenly too, which is its own kind of ruin. You nod to the boy, and he shifts his rhythm slightly without needing to be told why. The bellows breathing longer and slower now, coaxing the heat outward until the whole bed of coals glows the same steady red-orange, edge to edge. Only then do you lay the chisel into the fire, the damaged tip buried in the heart of the coals, the shank left clear of the worst heat so your tongs have somewhere cool to grip. You do not watch it constantly. You busy your hands instead, laying out a fresh set of tongs, checking the water trough, running a thumb along the face of your favourite hammer to feel for any roughness left over from yesterday. The iron will tell you when it's ready. It always does. When you finally lift it clear, the metal glows a bright orange, not yet the near-white heat that would scale it badly, but hot enough that it moves like something almost alive under the tongs. You lay it against the anvil and bring the hammer down once, testing rather than shaping, and the iron answers with a soft yielding give, no resistance in it, no dullness. Good heat. You could strike now and the metal would move exactly where you asked it. Instead, you pause. The boy glances up from the bellows, curious, though he has learned by now not to ask why the hammer is not falling. You turn the chisel slightly under the light from the doorway, studying the colour one more time, the way a man studies a face he has known for years, looking for something out of place. The colour is right. The give was right. But the fold in the metal runs deeper than the surface suggests, and striking it now in its current shape would only close the crack over on itself rather than driving it out. Better to cut first. You set the chisel back into the coals for a moment longer, while you reach for the hardy chisel seated in the anvil's square hole, its edge worn but true. When you draw the iron out again, you set the damaged fold directly over the hardy's edge, and bring the hammer down with a single clean stroke, the folded metal parting away cleanly, falling to the dirt floor in a small curled scrap no larger than a fingernail. The boy's eyes follow it down. You do not explain. You simply set the shortened chisel back against the anvil face and begin drawing the fresh edge out, the hammer falling now in a steady, unhurried rhythm, iron thinning and lengthening beneath each blow, the ring of metal on metal settling into the workshop like something the walls have long since learned to hold. The heat begins to fade after a dozen strokes, the orange dulling toward a deeper red, and you feel it in the hammer before you see it in the colour, the iron growing stiffer under your arm, less willing to move. You lift it and return it to the fire without a second thought, No frustration in the motion, only the plain understanding that cold iron struck too long only wastes the smith's strength and bruises the metal's grain. The boy pumps the bellows again. The coals brighten. You wait, watching the colour climb back toward orange, your hammer resting easy in your hand, in no more hurry now than you were at dawn. The chisel takes its final shape slowly, the edge drawn thin and even under a series of lighter blows now, no longer the heavy shaping strokes of before, but something closer to finishing work, each strike smaller than the last. You quench it in the trough, the water hissing and clouding for a moment before settling, and lift the tool dripping to look along its edge in the light from the doorway. Straight, even, no trace of the fold that ruined it. You draw a thumbnail lightly along the bevel, not to test sharpness yet, only to feel that the shape sits true and satisfied. You set it aside to cool fully before the final sharpening on the stone. The boy has moved on from the bellows to sorting yesterday's scrap into the box near the wall, small offcuts and bent nails separated from anything too warped or thin to be worth keeping. You glance over without breaking your own rhythm and see him hesitate over a bent strip of iron, unsure whether it belongs with the useful scrap or the waste. You take it from him without a word, turning it once, feeling its thickness between your fingers. Enough there for a small hook, maybe 2 nails if you're careful with the cuts. You set it in the keep pile yourself and return to your work, and he watches where you placed it, filing the decision away the same way he has filed away 100 others this year. A voice calls from the doorway before the sun has fully cleared the rooftops, and a cart driver steps in, a length of iron fitting in his hand, the kind that binds a wheel hub to its axle. It has worked loose over weeks of harbour roads, the metal fatigued rather than broken, still sound enough to save. You take it from him, turn it under the light, press a thumb against the worn section. Not cracked, simply stretched. The way iron stretches under thousands of small shocks, it was never quite forged heavy enough to shrug off entirely. You could reforge the whole fitting new, but there is no need. A short reheat, a few careful blows to draw the metal back to its proper thickness, and it will outlast another season of harbour roads. You tell him to return after midday, and he nods and leaves the way he came, already thinking of the next stop on his route. You set the fitting near the fire to wait its turn and glance again at the mason's chisel cooling on the bench, and beside it, the small bent strip the boy nearly discarded. 3 pieces of work now waiting on you, none of them large, none of them the kind of task that would impress anyone watching from the street, and all of them exactly the kind of work that keeps a city's carts rolling and its masons cutting stone. You have never made a sword in this workshop. You have made 1,000 small things that let other men do their own work without stopping to think about the iron that makes it possible. The fire is hot again by the time you turn back to it, and you lay the cart fitting into the coals, judging by eye how long the worn section will need before it softens enough to draw back to shape. While it heats, you take up the bent scrap iron, and, working quickly in the spare moments between checking the fitting, begin drawing out a simple hook from one end of it, the kind an innkeeper or warehouse worker might need on any given week. It cost you almost nothing, a few minutes stolen between larger tasks, and by midday you will have something worth a few coins made from metal that would otherwise have gone into the scrap pile forever. Nothing here is wasted if a man is patient enough to see what it might still become. The mason returns just past midday, stepping into the doorway with the particular impatience of a man who has spent the morning without his best tool. You hand him the chisel without ceremony, and he turns it over once, testing the edge against his thumb the way men who work stone always do, feeling for a bite rather than looking for a shine. He grunts something close to approval, presses a few coins into your palm, and is gone again, almost before the boy has finished sweeping the scrap from around the anvil. No words exchanged beyond what was necessary. None were needed. He has brought you work before and will bring it again, and that is its own kind of conversation. The cart driver arrives not long after, drawn by whatever internal clock tells a working man when a job is likely finished, and you lift the fitting from where it has been cooling and set it in his hand. He turns it, testing the thickness with his fingers the way the mason tested the edge, and nods once before fitting it back against the hub to check the seat. Satisfied, he pays and leaves, and you are already turning toward the next piece of iron waiting its turn near the fire, a small pile that has grown steadily through the morning without ever once feeling urgent. A fishman comes next, smelling faintly of the harbour even at this distance from it, holding out a bent hook and a knife with an edge gone dull from scaling fish all week. 2 different repairs, 2 different priorities. The hook is simple, a quick reheat, and a few taps to true the curve, done almost before he has finished describing how it caught on something beneath the water and bent. The knife takes longer, the edge drawn thin against the stone rather than the anvil, patience rather than force now the whole of the work. You could have sharpened it first and set the hook aside, but a bent hook means lost work tomorrow morning, while a dull knife merely means slower work tonight. And you have long since learned to weigh a man's day against his tools before deciding where your hands go first. The innkeeper's boy arrives with a hinge wrapped in cloth, the kind of ordinary door fitting that fails quietly and inconveniently rather than dramatically, and you set it aside behind the fisherman's knife, knowing it will take only minutes once you reach it and that the inn's door can survive propped a while longer. Behind him comes a warehouse worker with 3 iron hooks worn smooth and thin from years of hauling rope-slung cargo, asking whether they are worth saving or better replaced outright. You test each one between your fingers, feeling for the give of tired metal against the solid resistance of iron still sound. 2 are worth reforging. The 3rd has thinned past trusting with real weight, and you tell him so plainly, setting it into the scrap pile rather than pretending otherwise. He does not argue. Men who bring you their tools have learned that your word about what iron can still bear is worth more than what they hope to hear. By the time the afternoon light has begun to slant low through the doorway, the bench holds a short line of finished work, the fisherman's hook and knife, the innkeeper's hinge reset and swinging true, 2 reforged warehouse hooks laid beside a scrap of iron too far gone to save. You move through what remains with the same unhurried rhythm that carried you through the morning, weighing each piece by what its owner needs tomorrow, rather than by when it arrived at your door. The boy banks the coals lower as the light fades, not out entirely, only quieted, ready to be woken again at dawn. You glance once more at the small pile of scrap iron saved rather than discarded, at the tools waiting collection, at the fire settling toward rest, and there is nothing dramatic in any of it. Only a city's ordinary iron, quietly kept alive for one more day. The light has gone from gold to grey by the time you begin closing the forge, the coals raked low and banked with fresh ash, until only a faint warmth remains beneath the surface, enough to wake quickly tomorrow without needing to be built from nothing. The boy sweeps the last of the day's scale and ash toward the door, sending up a thin grey cloud that settles slowly in the still evening air, and you set the tongs and hammers back in their places on the shelf, each one returning to the same worn groove it has occupied for years. You take one last look at the scrap box before covering it. The small hoard of offcuts and bent iron sorted through the day, saved rather than wasted, waiting for whatever shape tomorrow's work will ask of them. Near the door, propped where its owner will find it easily, sits the innkeeper's hinge, already carried back and fitted, the door swinging quiet and true again for guests who will never know or ask why it once stuck. The mason's chisel is gone from the bench entirely now, back in a stone-dusted hand somewhere across the city, waiting for morning light to strike its edge against limestone once more. You bank the doorway shutter into place, check the fire one final time out of habit rather than need, and step out into the cooling evening air, the boy falling into step beside you without being asked. The street has changed its character since dawn. Carts fewer now, doorways glowing faintly with lamplight. The harbour sounds softer and more distant than they were this morning. Somewhere out past the breakwater a fisherman is likely mending nets by lamplight, his hook straightened and waiting for tomorrow's early water. Somewhere along the harbour road a cartwheel turns smoothly on a fitting that no longer complains under its own weight. Home smells of the stew your wife has kept warm since midday, and you wash the worst of the soot from your hands and forearms in the basin by the door before sitting, the water going dark and grey the way it always does. The meal is simple, bread softened in broth, a little cheese, the last of yesterday's olives, and you eat it slowly, the ache in your shoulders finally allowed to settle now that the day's work has stopped asking anything more of you. The boy eats beside you, quieter than usual, tired in the particular way that comes from a full day at the bellows rather than idleness. Outside, the city continues on without needing your attention any further tonight, carrying forward on iron already shaped, edges already sharpened, fittings already set back into place. You do not think of it as anything remarkable. It rarely feels that way from inside a soot-stained apron and a day spent bent over an anvil. But somewhere across Ostia, stone is waiting to be cut again tomorrow, and hooks are waiting to be cast into morning water, and carts are waiting to roll once more toward the harbour. All of it a little steadier for the hours spent at your forge today. You bank the thought the same way you bank the fire, low and quiet, enough to carry forward without needing tending, and turn towards sleep, the smell of smoke still faint in your hair, another ordinary day folded into the ones that came before it, and another one already waiting, unhurried, at the edge of tomorrow's light. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the past. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the show so you never miss another ordinary life. Until next time, remember, every road, loaf of bread, fishing net, workshop, and home was built by hands history rarely recorded. This has been History of Ordinary People, Live the Lives History Forgot.